Welcome everyone. We're still waiting for people to join. So the numbers are raising and then we will start in a minute or so. So for those joining now, we're going to start soon. We're just waiting for people to join. We're going to give it a couple of minutes still. So we are now at 80 participants, just giving it one more minute, and then we will start the NATURANCE WebStival. Okay, we're almost at 90 participants now. And I would like to welcome everybody to this first NATURANCE Festival today. Thank you so much for registering and for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you here. We're also very happy that there's a lot of interest in today's event. We're going to talk about innovation in finance for nature-based solutions. We will open the session by sharing some housekeeping info for you. So we would like to invite you to turn on your cameras and to turn off your mics, please. And feel free to post questions or comments in the chat session. And of course, we're going to have a team that will be overlooking the chat, whereas we are doing this event today. We would also like to inform you that this is being recorded. So yeah, so that everybody is aware. And now I would like to start by getting to know a little bit more about you today in the room so that we can have a picture. And so please, we're going to ask you to log into the Slido page and write the code #NATURANCE. So we're going to see it on the screen soon. And we're also going to post it on the chat so that everybody can join. And we're going to make some questions to you so that we know who is in the room with us today. Jacob, I think you're sharing the screen.
Alrighty, I will share my screen now. So you can join the Slido here with your phone and the barcode or using the code below. I will give you all a minute to join. There will just be a few quick questions to get to know the room as well as each other and our knowledge here.
Let's give people a little bit of time so that they can scan the code, and then we're going to start with the questions. All right, I guess everybody, oh, we have 100 participants by now. You just give the 5 to 8 minutes and the numbers grow. So, so we are inviting everyone to scan the QR code here so that we can have an impression of who is in the room with us today for this WebStival of the NATURANCE project. And the first question for you, you're going to see it on the screen, is on a scale from 1 to 5, what is your knowledge of nature-based solutions? So we're going to see live here the statistics. Oh, so it seems like well-rounded is with 43%. And people who have somewhat knowledge on the topic, it's 31%. And 7% would like to learn more about this. Good, so we have knowledgeable people with us joining the WebStival today. Thank you, Jacob. So we're going to go towards the second question. And the second question is, on a scale from 1 to 5, what is your knowledge on eco-disaster risk reduction? So getting a bit more specific here. Oh, look, so 30%, I would like to learn. And pretty equal, somewhat knowledgeable, well-rounded. And we have 5% that are experts really on the topic, extremely knowledgeable. All right, nice to know. So I hope you can learn something with us today and embark with us in NATURANCE to learn more about disaster risk reduction with nature-based solutions. So the last question we wanted to ask you today is, on a scale from 1 to 5, what is your knowledge on the relations between nature-based solutions and insurance? Not so knowledgeable, or I would like to learn. So similar to the last question, I guess people, okay, it's almost a tie between not so knowledgeable and I would like to learn. All right, I think we have a good idea of who is in the room with us today, and I hope you can learn from us and we can exchange also in the chat. Thank you so much, Jacob, for this.
Of course. I'll stop sharing now.
With this, I would like to ask Laura to reshare the slides. And now we're gonna hear some.
Anche per I panelist.
Just a second, I'm gonna mute you. Oh yeah, thank you. So now I would like to have some brief opening words from Jaro and Alice. Jaro Misiak is the NATURANCE coordinator, and he works at CMCC as the Director for Risk Assessment and Adaptation Strategies. And Alice is ICLE Europe's coordinator for nature-based solutions and biodiversity. So Jaro, I would like to ask you to tell us a bit about the journey that CMCC took from proposal writing to the coordination of the NATURANCE project.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Daniela, for introducing me. Yes, I would like to join you and welcome you first at this Festival of Financial Innovation for Nature-Based Investment and Insurance Instruments. So we are very delighted to gather here today to explore how new approaches that integrate finance and nature conservation can work. And throughout this festival, we will dive into how innovative financial instrument might support investment and insurance solutions that are targeted to the protection and preservation of natural ecosystems. And we hope that we will discover how those advancements can foster a relationship between economic growth and environmental stewardship. So to answer your question, we initially embarked on designing this research project by recognizing that nature-based solutions have a transformative potential for ecosystem restoration and conservation, and they together hold a great potential in addressing climate change and promoting sustainable development. We realized also that there was an untapped connection between nature-based solutions and the insurance and investment sectors. And we saw the opportunity to bridge those domains and explored how the incentive could work and how they could be scaled up to fill the nature conservation and biodiversity finance gap. The journey has been a collaborative effort. So we partnered with experts in the field of climate science, finance, insurance, and together the goal from the beginning was to develop products and mechanisms that could provide incentive for investment in nature-based solutions, while also providing financial protection against climate-related risk. And at this stage, and in my personal capacity as the coordinator, but also as a researcher, I would like to remember the contribution of Georgina Mary Mays, who unfortunately passed away in 2020, and who was at the beginning of when we started to design the research project. You might know her as a brilliant ecologist and conservational scientist working at the University College of London. And it's really a pity that she couldn't be with us at this event when we will embark in community engagement and getting some suggestion how to advance this research agenda. She would be thrilled and amazing to listen to those proposals here. The second thing I would like to acknowledge is also the project that paved the way for NATURANCE, and that was the precursor project that was NIAD. NIAD was a Horizon 2020 funded project focusing on nature, insurance value, and demonstration studies. Right, so we are not starting from scratch. There's been a lot of interesting work, and we will display that research throughout this festival. We will listen to inspirational talks and enlightening presentation. And we hope that this festival will be beginning of a fruitful collaboration as we embark on this transformative journey at the intersection of finance and nature. So this is from me. Thank you again and welcome.
Thanks so much, Jaro, and thanks also for recognizing the precursors to remember here, Georgina. That's very, very considerate, and also to remember the NIAD project that came before. These are, of course, a very important project that paved the way for us to be here with NATURANCE. Thank you so much for that, and we're really happy to be with CMCC in this journey and to take all of you today. We have 124 people here online with us, and I'm sure that these numbers are going to be growing throughout the day. So now I would like to invite Alice. Alice coordinates Network Nature, an NBIS platform, which among other things brings together more than 50 EU-funded NBIS projects. What role can NATURANCE play in this landscape, Alice?
Thank you very much, Daniela, for this question, and also a warm welcome from our side to everyone. And I thought the slide results were really interesting, and it seems that we're sort of really feeding into an interest and to a need as NATURANCE. As you said, Daniela, we from ICLEI, we coordinate Network Nature, and Network Nature is really a central nature-based solutions platform within Europe, but also feeds into global work. And we support and bring really these 50+ EU-funded nature-based solutions projects together. There are many more, but those are just the ones under 2 specific research programs, Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe. So that's what we do. But at the same time, and that's really something we pride ourselves in and sort of drives us, and I guess that's what we can work together with NATURANCE on, is also to convey the benefits of nature-based solutions to other target audience who do not yet know about nature-based solutions or the link to insurance or financing mechanisms and sort of the potential for disaster risk reduction. So we are really trying to sort of reach land managers, regional and local planners, landscape architects, big businesses, and I think that's where also NATURANCE comes in, because we also need to address insurers and investors as well. And I thought last week we had a Network Nature annual event, and the European Investment Bank shared the report on investing in nature-based solutions and really analyzed what the barriers and opportunities are. And on the one hand, it's really these market mechanisms that are required for uptake of nature-based solutions. They are not in place. But at the same time, also regulatory and subsidy reforms, which sort of incentivize private and public sectors. And I think that's where NATURANCE can really help and try bring in, incentivize the insurance sector to look into and help finance, help promote nature-based solutions. And financing nature-based solutions is already something that quite a few nature-based solutions projects look into, as well as sort of the benefit of nature-based solutions to reduce the impacts of climate change. But I think what's the strong suit of NATURANCE is that NATURANCE can brings together already very strong adaptation and NBIS communities, and can ask the question, so what role does insurance have, including in financing and implementing nature-based solutions, and also how are nature-based solutions and disaster risk reduction connected? Because so far that's only sort of handled from the adaptation perspective. So I think that's something that Network Nature and NATURANCE can bring the adaptation nature-based solutions communities together, and really provide strong evidence and arguments for the role of nature-based solutions in the insurance and disaster risk reduction sectors. And I guess one of the starting points for NATURANCE could be to explain to insurance what are nature-based solutions. It seems to be clear for most of the room here. And here I can also put a link to a very nice brochure in to explain what explains nature-based solutions. But I think NATURANCE can also explain to the NBIS adaptation and disaster risk community sort of what do insurance solutions look like around nature-based solutions? What is their impact? So I think that is really what Network Nature and NATURANCE can work together on, and NATURANCE is sort of fill that gap here, because it's pretty clear that we need to convince others of the role of nature-based solutions in view of the current nature restoration law, which is argued for very controversially, unfortunately, but we do have the evidence, and we can only do this together.
Thank you so much, Alice, also for highlighting the nature restoration law. I hope that NATURANCE can contribute here as well. Hope that we don't get back to zero with the law not passing through. Let's see, let's hope for it that it goes through. Yeah, so with this, I want to invite now Peter Löffler. Peter, he is from the Directorate General for Climate Action, DG Klima. And DG Klima leads the European Commission's efforts to fight climate change at EU and international level. And hi, Peter, I'm happy to have you here with us. Could you provide us some insights on the role of nature-based solutions in achieving the climate goals outlined in the European Green Deal?
Oh, Daniela, I hope you can hear me well. And I'm glad I interrupted you, because I thought I've seen it all with video connection issues. But it was just a minute before the seminar started that I managed to sort of get connected. So thanks for inviting me really to the NATURANCE WebStival. I mean, let me really start by saying that fighting the climate crisis, but also protecting and restoring biodiversity are both key objectives of the European Green Deal. You know, if you look globally, we had, you know, the UN declared this to be the decade of ecosystem restoration, and we had in last December the Global Biodiversity Framework agreed, which sets out sort of the global targets and actions. And at the European level, we do have our biodiversity strategy for 2030. We last year, the Commission issued its proposal for a European nature restoration law, which is now being discussed between member states and the Parliament, sort of the co-legislators. In these policy fields, I think, you know, public policy making and regulation are important. We must put good frameworks into place, but it needs more than that. And I think this is great why we have the NATURANCE project, which works on insurance and investment solutions, and why today it's so good that we have our relevant sectors and experts at the table. And this is because we do need innovations in the field to help restore nature and then scale up and speed up the use of nature-based solutions. There are many important reasons to do that, and one of them is really the climate crisis. On the climate crisis itself, I don't think I have to say a lot. You know, here in Belgium, it's not even summer, but we are sweltering since 2 weeks in a historic heat wave. Again, I have to say, we had again a couple of records broken last year for extreme weather events. We had the highest summer temperature. We had a record loss of glacier ice from the Alps. We had the second largest area burned by wildfires and a record number of wildfires occurring in Central and Northern Europe. So this is not anymore a Southern European problem anymore. And if we look ahead, Europe will keep warming more than all other continents, also in the future. So we can expect that temperature records will be broken regularly, and we know that we will be faced with more frequent and extreme weather events, regardless actually of any greenhouse gas emissions scenario. So I don't have to say that, you know, these developments are worrying us extremely. They're huge challenges, and I think they're also a huge source of significant and growing damages, losses, and risks. And now, policy-wise, of course, to limit the speed and the extent of global warming, we must rapidly cut our greenhouse gas emissions. And I guess I don't have to recall that our DG actually is currently leading an extremely intense effort to cut down greenhouse gas emissions and to bring Europe to climate neutrality by 2050 to prevent really the worst climate scenarios. But at the same time, we also must work to prevent and prepare for the effects of climate change, which now unfortunately cannot be avoided anymore to some degree. And so the policies which we have on climate mitigation and adaptation must work in tandem, but they also must work together with biodiversity policy. So we have a policy triangle. And in this triangle, we cannot achieve one objective without the other two. I think that's an important point. First, because land ecosystems are important as a greenhouse gas sink. We need them to help draw carbon out of the atmosphere and lock it away. We have, you know, according to our current legislation, we need the so-called land or LULUCF sector to remove 310 million tons of carbon equivalent per year from the atmosphere by 2030. And nature-based solutions can play a very big role in that. Secondly, nature-based solutions are a very promising means of countering the effects of climate change and helping us to adapt. They can often be very cost efficient, you know, and I'm thinking here of things like water regulation and cleaning, local cooling, erosion control, coastal protection, continued food and biomass provision, and so on. You know, and then in terms of cost efficiency, you know, coastal wetlands alone and protecting them could save the insurance industry about 50 billion annually from reducing flood damage losses. And the third point is that biodiversity and ecosystems themselves are unfortunately also vulnerable to climate change, you know, and the impacts of climate change on them risks undermining to some degree their role for climate mitigation and adaptation. For example, last year's droughts have been reducing the forest carbon sink in Europe. And so we must actually make an effort to restore and protect more nature. The IPCC says 30 to 50% of the land. to allow ecosystems to maintain their resilience to climate change and perform as intended. Now, within this context, the main roadmaps which we do have at the European level are the European Climate Law, the EU Adaptation Strategy, the EU Biodiversity Strategy, the EU Forest Strategy, and the EU Soil Strategy. There's a whole package of strategies. They work together. All of them make extensive reference to the use of nature-based solutions and to nature restoration. And let me also say that this is a very comprehensive agenda and it's a teamwork. So we're working really across the Commission on this agenda, and we cooperate closely with many other services to put these policies into practice. More specifically, really, if you look sort of at our DG Klima, we lead or contribute on a couple of initiatives in the field, which are currently ongoing. Let me mention the new framework for LULUCF, land use cover and forestry, or carbon removal certification. We contributed a lot to the proposed nature restoration law. We contributed to the revision of legal frameworks for plant and forest reproductive material. We are working on setting a framework for a new EU forest monitoring system. There is a forthcoming proposal on an EU soil health law. We are involved in the Wildfire Prevention Action Plan, in the New Deal for pollinators, and we are conducting an EU-wide climate risk assessment, the results of which we will publish in 2024. So I just hope this is a useful overview to get give a bit of an idea of the depth and of what we are trying, or working on actually in this area. Just before I close, let me just maybe say few more words on the NATURANCE project and today's event, because we do see insurance companies as key players in the nature restoration agenda, because they have sort of three roles. They insure natural capital itself, they invest in the development of nature-based solutions which reduce risks, and they invest also in nature-based solutions for larger financial returns. And I think these are three very important roles. And we do have in our unit, actually, the climate adaptation unit, the so-called climate resilience dialogue, which brings together stakeholders to increase climate risk insurance penetration and which helps to incentivize investment in good adaptation solutions. We have started that work last November. We will publish a first interim report around July. And we would be, of course, very pleased to have the feedback of the NATURANCE project consortium and its partners on that report if you are wanting to do that. I hope that was a useful scene setter and overview for all of you. Many thanks again for your invitation, and I look really forward to the next parts of the event. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Peter. I think one thing that I want to highlight here is, of course, we have this intertwined crisis happening at the moment. So, of course, the solutions should also be intertwined. And that speaks a lot to the work that you have been doing together with the other DGs and trying to do, joint work with all these policies that you're putting out in the reports and the studies. And of course, NATURANCE will be very, very happy to give feedback to that report. We want to contribute, we want to participate, and also invite here the community to also participate. So thanks so much for being here today. Yeah, with this, I would like now to call to the stage our keynote, Professor Svenja Surminski, from the London School of Economics and Political Science and Managing Director for Climate and Sustainability at Marsh McLennan. Svenja, we're going to have our colleague sharing your slides. So please say next so then she can know when to change. And please welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much. And hello, everybody. It's a real pleasure. Well, at least to see a lot of familiar names, and I've already seen some familiar faces. Yeah, first of all, congratulations to the consortium of getting the WebStival up and running, and it's fantastic. Yaro, I still remember the very early days of forming this consortium, and yeah, it's always great when something then actually comes to fruition and when something is in action. So yeah, no, I'm really, really excited about where NATURANCE is. And I'm even more excited about the opportunities and, the possibilities. So what I will do is I'll give, a quick sort of, insights, both, or mostly sort of from the practice side, because you know, since NATURANCE started, I've actually picked up a new role in the insurance industry. And but I'm also supporting the LSE team. And I just thought I'll share a little bit of the thinking. And, you know, I know obviously in the consortium, we have colleagues from Willis Towers Watson, and a lot of other consortium members are very much engaging with insurers. And so I think, you know, we're in a very strong position to actually, you know, make these innovation ideas a reality. So yeah, if we just move on. So I'll share a few thoughts and hopefully set the scene for this exciting event. So if we go to the next slide. Well, I mean, I don't really have to say much about this, although maybe in terms of what my role within the industry is, I use this a lot when I talk to insurers, but also when I talk to businesses and to governments. And I think, you know, if I would have shown this slide 2 years ago, you know, I think I would have seen a lot of blank faces and people would say, oh, can you explain? And I think we are slowly moving, you know, to the next level, and people realize, wow, you know, what are nature services? They understand that, and also they realize what the challenges are. So I think that's an important step. Next slide, please. But then I think the question is, what can we do in response? And I thought I'd share this slide with you to also show a little bit of the, you know, sort of the way I look at NATURANCE. And I think the starting point is just to realize, you know, we can't have climate adaptation, and we also can't achieve net zero without nature and without, you know, healthy functioning ecosystems. I mean, that's just the reality. And you know, sort of the thinking in NATURANCE, you know, it looks more at the resilience and the adaptation side. But I think, you know, under that sort of heading of natural capital, that's why I've sort of showed this here. You know, this comes out of work we've done with the Zurich Flood Resilience Alliance here at LSE. And it's the 5 capitals of resilience concept. And, you know, natural capital is, you know, has for a long time been sort of fundamental element there. And we've been doing a lot of work with communities to really sort of ensure that when you say resilience, it's not just a question of, well, you either have insurance or people are aware, or, you know, you have skills or you have a defense mechanism, but starting to also recognize the role that nature plays in this. And that's this sort of thinking that came out of the Flood Resilience Alliance. So the thinking is good, but what do we do in terms of action, and what are the underlying tools? Are there good methodologies and principles to guide this? And I think this is then where NATURANCE comes in. And I'll come back at the very end to this idea of an innovation lab, because that's central to the whole concept. Next slide, please. So, you know, I think where we are now within the industry, and we is probably an overstatement. So, you know, I'm not speaking on behalf of the whole industry, but I think I have a fairly good overview. I think it's sort of moved from understanding the risks to now considering, you know, taking action and what that entails, and how to design, you know, new instruments and solutions. And, you know, that's quite a big step. And I think, you know, I sometimes repeat myself, you know, this is not easy and not straightforward. I mean, when we're talking about nature, you know, there's so many complexities and underlying dynamics that, you know, I don't have, you know, a background in ecosystem services, and I'm sort of a quick learner, but I'm constantly worried that I sort of oversimplify that, or that, you know, there is, you know, there's so much, you know, that can potentially also go wrong, you know, well-intentioned steps to actually work with nature that then have, you know, unintended consequences. I think we just need to be realistic of that. That doesn't mean that, you know, that should sort of, you know, sort of stifle innovation. It just puts a lot of onus on actually collaboration between, you know, experts, scientists, credible, you know, organizations, NGOs. And I think that's why a lot of, you know, the insurance sector is also engaging, you know, with WWF, with the Nature Conservancy, with bodies that actually have a lot of experience in this space. Next slide. So, you know, I think what I've been observing is this notion over the last year or two, or maybe 2 years, of sort of nature positive paradigm. I mean, that sounds very grand, but when you talk to insurers, there's sort of this notion, well, we want to embrace a nature positive business model. And well, I'm still struggling a little bit with that term, what it actually means and how you define it. And, there are working groups, UNEP-FI, I'm part of a working group there. And again, I think it's very well intentioned. The question is just, how to realize that and how to internalize nature and how to integrate it also into our models and tools and our underwriting products. Next slide, please. So, part of that is obviously a shifting political and regulatory landscape. And I've been looking at this in my role at Marsh McLennan also to help guide, clients through this. And, I mean, this is for the insurance industry or for other corporates and also for governments. This is sort of a really difficult landscape to navigate and to keep up with initiatives, commitments, targets, and so on. And I think, just keeping track of that is an important one. But there's also unpredictability, I think, how will these be imposed? How will these be implemented? What effects will they have? So we should keep that in mind and not just assume that, we all sort of live in this nature positive new reality. I don't think that is true. So we need to keep that in mind. Next slide, please. And then the other trend that is happening is, this massive, innovation in terms of analytics and understanding the, what it is we're looking at. And, it sort of comes a little bit from the climate context where we have, a massive amount of initiatives, including disclosure, reporting, and you can see some here that are sort of complementing TNFD, which is kind of emerging now as as sort of a new standard, a guide for how to assess actually nature loss and nature risk, but also looking at the double materiality of nature. And yeah, I mean, I've spent some time, my company, Marsh and Mercer and also Oliver Wyman work very closely with TNFD. But again, it is something that is actually, quite hard. And, my concern is at some point that, this is to get this right, it requires really a lot of detailed assessment and understanding. And this is new for most companies. So, it is quite a challenge, but, that underlines why initiatives such as NATURANCE are so important right now to actually bring together players to actually have a sort of an open discussion and then reflect on what's feasible in terms of innovation. Next slide. So, obviously underlying, the whole sort of notion of regulation and disclosure, also trends and markets and financing. And I think there's this expectation that we will also see more investments in nature and in nature-based solutions, and that private capital will have a critical role to play. And I think, this is starting to shift, but we know that, this is still early days. So, that is something to just keep in mind, while NATURANCE also has that, I think, as one of the ambitions to also foster, making nature-based solutions also more investable, if you like. Next slide. So, I just wanted to leave with you a few thoughts from a sort of private sector perspective. So if we move to the next part. So what I think has been happening, and it's really great that Peter mentioned also the climate resilience dialogue that the EC has been running, and so my company has been involved in, is that we really have a much better understanding of what climate resilience and adaptation are. And I think nature-based solutions, they have arrived as a fundamental part of that. But we also know that we're not really doing it well enough, and that, these tools are underutilized, underfunded, or inefficiently implemented. And, you know, I'm speaking in the context of Europe, but, you know, in developing countries, you know, there are obviously further challenges when it comes to that. Next slide. So, you know, I think where then insurance comes in, and I sort of look at this through the lens of, you know, risk management. I mean, ultimately, you know, you can look at, you know, climate risk management and say, well, how can we bring in nature, and what role can nature play in helping us, both reducing our impact on nature, but also harnessing, you know, the services. And, you know, I think that's sort of the mindset that a lot of insurers, but also now more businesses are starting to understand, you know, how we can sort of then leverage innovations, but also identify new opportunities. Next slide. And yeah, I mean, then it's sort of usually when you have these discussions, you then sort of frame it around certain hazards. And I know later on we're having discussions and innovation labs, and that's the whole sort of way that NATURANCE is set up. One focus is, for example, on wildfire. And again, so we've been doing some work, colleagues, particularly Guy Carpenter, with the Nature Conservancy on, you know, how can we quantify nature-based approaches, for example, for wildfire risk reduction. And, you know, that is, again, it's not easy, it's not straightforward, but it's something where, you know, it is really critical. And I think NATURANCE has the opportunity to take that early work that's been happening, some of the early pilots, and then say, okay, well, what are the results from that, or where are the sort of barriers, and what is it, you know, what is it that we can do to scale these up? And I think that's where the innovation labs can play a big part. Next slide. And I think, you know, just to sort of bring this home, so my vision in all of this is ultimately it's about, you know, sort of trying to come up with a really, you know, broad and holistic and integrated approach to adaptation resilience. And, you know, we're sort of this vision, if you like, of blending different approaches to resilience, and, you know, nature-based solutions, you know, need to play a fundamental part. And I think people really like it. They like nature because it sounds great. But when you then ask them, okay, well, how to integrate it, you know, there are challenges around trust. I mean, you know, often, you know, do you trust a nature-based solution because you might not have much experience with it, or, you know, it might take a time to actually come to fruition. And I think those are some sort of practical challenges that I see a lot in the industry and working also with companies that hopefully NATURANCE can help us with. Next slide. And yeah, I just thought I'll give also some examples from the flooding, and we've just published earlier this year a report which sort of tries to bring together this, you know, this strategic approach to resilience, and a key focus is integrating, well, in this case, we call it gray and green infrastructure. I know some people might not like the term green infrastructure, but, you know, I think we know it's working with nature. And, you know, there are some examples here, one from China, one from Florida. I mean, you know, everybody likes talking about mangroves, and it is a really impressive way of protecting coastlands. But I think what we're trying to do is also to see, okay, well, what works also at a smaller scale, maybe within a city, urban flood risk management. You know, what can we do in the context of acute issues that we face here in Europe? And I think there's a lot that we can learn also from some of these international examples. Next slide, please. So I thought there was a slide with the innovation lab, because that was my way of closing and saying, look, so somehow that has disappeared. But because I think what all this points towards is, you know, I think the industry is at a juncture, and there's a lot of appetite, but we also recognize where the challenges are. And, you know, I think that's where the timing of NATURANCE is actually really good, because it can try and add a bit of structure and clarity and help sort of, foster some of these innovations. And, you know, I think, we're in a good position, but, it won't be easy. And I don't want to be sort of, promising the world here, but I think, if we add some clarity also in terms of, modeling, in terms of, sort of quantifying, in terms of then translating some of that knowledge into workable innovation for Europe, I think, that would be fantastic. And I know not only on the insurance, but also on the investment side, there's good potential and people are genuinely interested. And a lot of them have committed to nature positive business models. So, this could actually, meet many open doors. And that's why, I really, again, congratulate NATURANCE to actually having arrived at this point. My colleague Victor Reza from the LSE will later on introduce, I think, at least one or maybe two of the innovation labs that we're working on. One is on urban flooding. The other one is more focused on developing countries with insure resilience. And, I think as we see these innovation labs progressing, it is, it's really exciting. And I hope those won't remain just sort of exercises on paper, but then also find their way into real action. So with that, many thanks.
Thank you so much for this. It was really incredible to hear from you, Svenja. It was such a complete presentation, given the whole landscape and, raising a lot of important topics. I'm passionate about the topic of the nature positive economy, but I agree with you. There is still a lot of research that has to be done to define what that really is. So that we know that we're all talking about the same, concept. Right. So with this, before we go into the break, we're going to talk a little bit about the NATURANCE project now, to know a bit more about what it is, what is it doing. So now I would like to call into the stage like the work package leads. We had a slide with all the work package leads exactly, and we're going to interact with them, and so that you can get an overview of what the NATURANCE project is about. And I would like to start here with Joanne. Let's see if Joanne has already joined us. I don't see her yet, or maybe the camera is not on yet. But we have all the others. So we have Wouter here, we have Victor, we also have Alice, and of course we have Shara also here, and we also have Fleur from the Commission. So we're going to start maybe with you, Wouter, because I cannot see Joanne. So Wouter, could you please present yourself and tell us from your perspective what is needed for us to work in this field, and what are you exactly working on? Okay, maybe Wouter is also not online at this stage. Okay, so if he's not online,
I'm here. There was just a technical delay in transferring me to the session. So thank you very much for giving me the word, and for the question that you asked, Daniela. So maybe I should very briefly introduce myself. So I'm a professor in environmental economics that's specialized in climate change adaptation solutions and insurance research. And I think what is needed also in this field is to also further clarify the potential role that insurance can play in potentially stimulating nature-based solutions. And then from the research question, I think it's also important to get a better understanding of the risk reduction that can be obtained from nature-based solutions, and how that can facilitate, for instance, the insurability of climate risk. Because I think at the moment also many insurance companies are recognizing that insurance can play an important role in, for instance, stimulating nature-based solutions, potentially also playing a role in co-financing them. But then also this risk reduction aspect should be clearly understood. And within NATURANCE, we're also doing a stock taking. So what type of methods, for instance, exist that insurance can use for better estimating this risk reduction? And we're also doing research ourselves to further improve these type of methods to facilitate that discussion.
Perfect, Wouter. Thank you so much. So it's nice to have the Vrije Universiteit here from Amsterdam participating in this project and making such an important contribution with the work package that you're leading. With this, I would now like to ask Victor. So Victor from the London School of Economics and Political Science, you already heard from Svenja that he's going to talk today a bit about the innovation labs later. But first, Victor, maybe you can tell us a bit what is the work that you were doing, focusing on bringing NBIS, disaster risk reduction, and the insurance worlds together.
Yeah, hi everyone, and thank you so much for organizing and running this event to Daniela and colleagues. So just very briefly, my name is Victor Rötzer. I'm a research fellow at the Grantham Research Institute here at the London School of Economics. My work is, or where I'm coming from, is climate change adaptation, disaster risk reduction, and resilience, with a particular focus on flooding. And with my background in environmental sciences, I always believed in sort of nature should be at the core of every decision we make. And I think that seems to be increasingly mainstream, but it's also becoming increasingly an important factor because of the multiple crises we face: climate change, biodiversity loss, pollution. So I think rethinking our relationship with nature is really important. And that's also, I think, where insurance can play a really important role. And what we also sort of do in our research here is insurance has always been sort of has been introduced to protect people from financial hardship, and also help to manage risks and also to make the world a safer place. And given what's currently at stake, insurers, if they want to stay true to their mission, I think it's really important that nature becomes part of the sort of product solutions and sort of services they offer. And I think this is something that's really important in terms of promising, in terms of keeping the promises of insurance going into the future. For me personally, I think the question around equity is very important. I think we all remember where we took our labs in city parks during the COVID pandemic, or also during recent heat waves, that nature is really something that's both important for our mental and physical health. And if we help to fight biodiversity loss and adapting using nature-based solutions, that's really something where we should make sure that everyone, and also the most vulnerable and marginalized groups in our society, benefit from. And I think this is also what we try to bring in our work. And I will later, as discussed, talk a bit about our innovation labs that try to bring together these different aspects. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Victor, for sharing with us the work that you're going to do with NATURANCE. It's very exciting. Now I see Joanne. Joanne, I would like to ask you to present yourself and tell us a bit about the work that you're doing, leading a work package in the project, and also driving this topic into the attention of others.
Okay, thank you very much. And it is a real pleasure to be here. Yes, I'm at IASA. I'm actually no longer leading this risk and vulnerability program, but I'm an emeritus research scholar working within the equity and justice group at IASA. So just as Victor has mentioned, equity justice is a very core concept behind the whole idea of nature-based solutions. I have been working for many years in the disaster risk reduction field, and this is in Sendai framework and so on and so forth. There has been huge emphasis on reducing disaster risk. I have to also say we have not been hugely successful at that. But I think that the whole equation, the whole discourse is changing. I think now we're realizing that what we have been doing for 20, 30 years is now embedded in really existential risks. Even though the flood is very important, the wildfire is extremely important to reduce the risk, we're recognizing, and I think Peter Loeffler put it very well, we're recognizing that if we don't tackle this also in conjunction with dealing with biodiversity loss and dealing with climate change, we've lost, we might win the battle, but we lose the war. So, so it's hugely important to start thinking in terms of any kind of disaster risk reduction, infrastructure or so, start thinking of what does it mean for climate and biodiversity loss. And that will set up a dilemmas. I mean, for one, we're going to have to think about this very fast and very big. UNEP tells us that we really are going to need to double financial flows into nature-based solutions by 2025. I mean, let's face it, that's around the corner. And that means that we really have to do this paradigm switch in our thinking and also in our practice. And so we've been working and we'll be working in this work package in NATURANCE very strong on what kind of changes, reforms do we need in our governance structures to meet that challenge? And what kind of changes do we need both in our public investments into nature-based solutions, but also in the private sector? And so I think, I will be talking more about this, particularly in the context of wildfire tomorrow, but I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean. This is really very interesting to hear. And indeed, I know that you're really diving into the topic of wildfire with the Innovation Lab. And I hope that everybody here today is also going to attend tomorrow so that we can really talk about these topics in more detail with the Innovation Labs. Thank you. Yes, so now I would like to pass the voice to Alice. So Alice, can we hear a little bit from you? You are also leading a work package within this project. Can you tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing?
Indeed, I can do so. Thank you very much for all those who have just joined. I'm Alice Ryle. I'm a coordinator for nature-based solutions at ICLEI Europe. And ICLEI is a global city network for sustainable urban development, and we are also partner in NATURANCE. So those of you who saw me beforehand, I came as a coordinator of Network Nature, so it's quite good that we have these two projects and platforms already aligned through this joint partnership, which is, I think, it'll be great to feed back insights between those two projects and their respective communities. So NATURANCE works really across nature-based solutions, adaptation and resilience, but also disaster risk reduction, as well as finance communities. They are, on the one hand, logically very closely aligned, but at the same time, they're also very different. And so all of these communities, and of course, they're never homogeneous, they're very different disciplines within these communities, but they are aware of each other. But it's sometimes really difficult to integrate work and to kind of, work towards a common goal or finding answering a certain research question or a policy question from these many different angles across these different sectors. So that's where NATURANCE and where we come in, also together with the partnership of NATURANCE to create a so-called network of networks. So what we want to do is really bring together leading organizations, initiatives, but also projects from these communities, because we really need to understand each other's language first, I think, and only then we can really create the knowledge and the evidence and the arguments that are needed to showcase and the insurance and financial solutions for nature-based solutions and disaster risk reduction. And we have sort of 4 dimensions of this. So on the one hand, we want to bring together coalitions on nature-based solutions, such as Network Nature, the Nature-Based Solutions Initiative, many that are sort of work on nature-based solutions, very, within that realm. But we also want to bring together organizations from the realm of sustainable investments, insurance and risk transfer, as well as risk assessment and management. So that's, again, something slightly different, but also the political level. So cities, particularly, and local and regional governments. And all of these dimensions are led by so-called network champions. Those are partners from within the NATURANCE projects, because you must understand that even NATURANCE as a consortium is a mix of organizations from different disciplines. So we all have this network which we will try and bring together to create a space really to exchange on needs, on questions, on trying to find this common vision and this common language as well, to then make sure that we can create knowledge through NATURANCE that is useful for all. So that's one side. The other side is really the task forces work. So I mentioned earlier, the nature-based solutions community with 50+ project is very strong. They have working groups, so-called task force groups, which look at different dimensions of nature-based solutions, from business models, governance models, to really more data management around it, to communication, like what's the narrative, how can we best showcase the benefit of nature-based solutions. And we essentially from NATURANCE will come in and contribute both this insurance, finance and disaster risk expertise, and thus sort of help align, integrate and co-create talking points to highlight the potential of insurance and finance solutions around nature-based solutions. And then sort of the third element, I would say, are webinars. So we really want to make sure that we on the one hand organize these festivals and webstivals. So next year there will be a face-to-face exchange with all of you, and hopefully even more. But we also have webinars which we will organize together with organizations, leading organizations from these different spheres, to really make sure that we don't just sort of create this knowledge and insights within the communities, but make sure that we reach others who are interested in that as well. So I hope that we can achieve that and say we've done it by the end of NATURANCE as well.
Thank you so much, Alice, for highlighting the importance of network with the work we're doing. I would like now to ask Jaro to come to the floor again. Jaro, we heard from you already a bit about the WebStival and about the NATURANCE project. Would you like to add anything? And if I have the chance, I would like to even post you a question that I see here from the audience, which I think fits quite well to be asked to you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Daniela. First of all, thank you very much, Ella, for everybody speaking before me, especially Peter and Svenja. Your talks have been really exciting and inspirational in the sense of what we are doing in this project. I can wrap up a little bit. So you have heard a lot of views of the work package leaders and to make sense of the whole architecture. So we are coordinating and supporting action. That means this is a type of project that is serving the community. So we are not focused only on the research, but we are creating venues for discussion, dialogues, knowledge exchange and sharing. And this WebStival is part of these community support actions. So what we are trying to do, we are looking into enabling conditions for new innovative financial instrument from the policy and governance point of view. We are looking into the wealth of evidence. So what we know about the performance of nature-based solution for disaster risk reduction and climate adaptation, and try to condense these and inform the development of these innovative financial instruments. But above that, we are also organizing a series of innovation laboratories, and those laboratories, and this is exactly answering the question of Edison, they are going to explore what the practical role of insurance and insurers, as well as the other societal bodies, might be in designing solution for specific geographic places, for specific socioeconomic conditions, and so on. So you will learn a little bit more about those innovation laboratories later on today and tomorrow, and you will see also how to contribute to those. But we are looking for making concrete, specific and evidence-based solution operational and transferable to other places. I have been trying to answer all the other questions, so you will find some answers also in the question answer tool. But I stop here to give the floor to others. Thank you very much, Daniela.
Thank you so much, Jaro, for this, and also for answering the question from Edison. I would like, before we go back to Svenja, because I also have a question for you, Svenja, I would like to invite Fleur from the Commission. So Fleur, you work in the Biodiversity and Nature-Based Solutions team at the Directorate General for Research and Innovation of the European Commission. After we heard today from Peter from DG Klima, we would like to hear from you. How does NATURANCE fit into the European NBIS landscape of projects? Can you tell us how we can best position this topic?
Sure. Thank you very much, Daniela, for the question, and thanks for having me today. I think it's very exciting to see so many people connected, and thanks a lot for the interesting speakers we've already heard from. I think I'll definitely echo some things that have already been said. So as you mentioned, I work for the DG in charge of research and innovation. And one of our main tasks is to analyze research gaps and draft the Horizon Europe funding program's call topics. So just for some context, the call topic for the project NATURANCE was born out of the fact that there is still a reluctance and incapacity of private entities to invest especially repayable capital into nature-based solutions. And this needs to be overcome for the scale up of the sector. Also, as Joanne has just mentioned, we're facing an enormous over $500 billion per year global future investment rate. And with that, a huge funding gap for investment into NBS. And in order to effectively overcome this, private investors need to be engaged to a greater degree. So at European level, as Peter has elaborated on, NBS appear in key Green Deal policies, from the climate adaptation strategy to the biodiversity strategy to the EU nature restoration law, but of course also in the bioeconomy strategy and the regulation on taxonomy and so on. Maybe zooming into the research and innovation aspect, the area of my work particularly. So under Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe, we have a lot of projects directly dedicated to NBS, and even more which contribute to NBS. We have an EU biodiversity partnership, which is called Biodiversa Plus, with further funding and a lot of work dedicated to NBS. But this, it even extends beyond this. So we have, for example, NBS projects under the mission adaptation, other missions, the list really goes on. And as part of this funding, it has also been invested in projects which are geared specifically towards the private sector take-up, as well as the economics of NBS. So I think it was Yarrow who referred to NIAD, the predecessor to NATURANCE earlier. And I just want to mention that there are many useful tools and resources created by this community. So for example, we have the Connecting Nature Enterprise platform, the publication, The Vital Role of NBS in a Nature Positive Economy, which is created by the task force, which Alice referred to before, which is dedicated specifically to supporting and accelerating private sector take-up and investment of NBS. At EU level, we have initiatives such as the EU Business for Biodiversity platform, the Finance for Biodiversity initiative, which also look at bridging gaps and facilitating the collaboration necessary with business and finance. And the way that NATURANCE positions into all of this, as Alice just referred to, is really as this network of existing networks by connecting the dots between these existing knowledge networks and hubs in this dedicated space. So with the private sector, insurance, disaster risk, adaptation in this realm. And of course, I mention all of this because just also to highlight the real momentum of NBS across the EU, not to mention at least also at global level. So maybe in more detail, how does NATURANCE really fit into this? So from our perspective, insurance companies pose a really great opportunity and quite still an untapped potential to increase investment for NBS, as they're uniquely positioned first and foremost as they're among the few companies whose operations benefit directly from solutions that can hedge physical risks and therefore for them result in lower payouts for claims over time. So, and however, with a few exceptions, many insurance companies haven't started to scale up their investments in nature-based solutions, although Svenja referred to this shift and how it's slowly starting. This is also highlighted in the recently published EIB report on access to finance conditions for NBIS. And this report sets out many recommendations, including relevant ones for the insurance sector. So, for example, on insurance premiums, developing de-risking mechanisms, as well as industry-level partnerships with the insurance sector, just to mention a few. And I don't know if I can post in the public chat, but I will definitely put a link to this report for those who haven't read it yet. It was launched last week at the Network Nature annual event. Maybe just to close, so more generally, it is of course recognized that a more suited enabling regulatory and market environment needs to be created in terms of fostering these investments into nature and NBS. Relevant to this, there are also additional legal acts to the EU Sustainable Finance Taxonomy, and a package was published yesterday with the aim, of course, to help guide investment towards more sustainable outcomes. I can again put the link in the chat if it's helpful. And then to come back, finally to again, the position of NATURANCE, I would think that this is really to promote and demonstrate the value and role of NBS as multi-benefit and biodiversity enhancing actions, but also as financial risk mitigation and financial wealth propelling mechanisms to deliver on our climate and biodiversity targets. So again, to echo what Alice has said at the beginning of the webinar, in a way, the research coming out of NATURANCE will also support much of the work of other projects, as it will ultimately give us a clearer idea on how to engage the insurance sector, which will lay sort of the groundwork for increased private investments, which in turn will help to mainstream and scale up investment in NBS across the board, and of course, contributing to achieving the nature positive economy or paradigm overall. But I'm aware of the time, so I'll stop there. But I'm looking forward to the rest of the interesting speakers and to go into depth of the project. Thank you.
Thank you immensely, Fleur, for this intervention. The team shared the link of the report in the chat for everyone. We encourage all to really take a look. It's really fresh out of press. Thank you so much, Fleur. I would like to pose a question to Svenja. She's still with us for some minutes before we go into the break. So Svenja, there's a question here from Holly Barclay. She's interested in the role of the insurance industry in helping to fund nature-based solutions, but she's still a bit unclear on what the motivation for this is, for insurers to finance NBS rather than simply passing on higher damage costs to the customers.
Yeah, thanks for that. I mean, I think there are different reasons why insurers are interested in nature, and why insurers also see this as a potential way of investing and putting some money into it. I mean, the first point is the sector is shifting towards more focus on risk reduction and resilience, and we know, given the challenge that we're facing with climate change, we need to look at all options, and nature is one of that. So I think the future of insurance, as I can see it, is really around that sort of risk reduction resilience element, and I think working with nature is an important part of that. I think the other element is, like, working with nature is also really important for mitigation of climate change. And, I think this notion of being nature positive is sort of seen also under that. And then I think, some of the leaders in this space, they see this as a part of their overall climate strategy. And, I mean, I think, we know that achieving net zero without functioning ecosystems, without nature, is going to be impossible. So starting to build up potential investment streams that go into that. I think, those seem to be the drivers. I'm not saying that it's then easy to translate that into real sort of investable propositions, but I think, there are some really interesting examples out there, and, I think that's where NATURANCE can hopefully play a role.
Perfect. Sabina, thanks so much for being with us. I know you have other commitments now, but it was really amazing also getting you to answer this question live. Thanks so much. So we're going to call the break, but before you go into the break, I would like to just call the attention that we're going to talk about the NATURANCE Innovation Labs that Svinia mentioned as well, right after the break. So please stay with us. We're going to see each other again at 2:30. Thank you very much. See you soon.
So I'm Almut Arnett. I'm a professor at the Karlsruhe Institute of Technology in Germany. I would say that people are talking about the climate and biodiversity crisis, but I think actually we are in a climate and biodiversity emergency. And we've seen so many extreme events and loss of both human life and ecosystems that we really need to make sure we find ways of addressing, reversing that loss. And that could well be with the insurance sector as a help.
I'm Andrea Staccione from CMCC and KIT. I think it can really push the implementation of nature-based solution and the acceptance of nature-based solution in the market to mainstream climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction, because it can provide many benefits to the population, not only in monetary terms, but also from the societal, environmental point of view, such as well-being and recreational quality of life.
My name is Carla Ferreira and I'm a researcher at Stockholm University in Sweden. Well, I think that the nature-based solution is a very up-to-date topic. There's a lot of policy interest on this topic. So we can see that there's a lot of small projects being implemented all around the world, and it's a good opportunity, timely to implement more large-scale nature-based solutions. But in order to do that, we need to understand how we can fund these kind of projects at large scale. So I think that policy is willing for this, and this project can give a good contribution on how we can implement these at larger scale and how can we manage these for having better impacts to the society.
So my name is Dionisio Perez Blanco. I'm an associate researcher at CNCC at the RAS division. Well, I hope that NATURANCE will help us understand what we should expect of insurance under uncertainty conditions, and also how we can mainstream the insurance of some risks that are currently outside of the system because they are considered uninsurable, and whether this can be made insurable thanks to nature-based solutions. I'm Guillermo Garcia, and I am a PhD student at IBM at Brugge Universitet. Well, I think it's really important to, first of all, understand the benefits and risk reduction benefits and co-benefits of nature-based solutions. Also to identify the possible financial strategies if we want to upscale nature-based solutions in the future. I'll be working in work package 4, which involves stock taking what do we already know about assessing the effectiveness of nature-based solutions and suggesting improved methods and tools for assessing and implementing nature-based solutions in an efficient manner.
Hi, I'm Jamie Pollard, and I'm part of WTW's Climate and Resilience Hub. So we're really excited to be part of the NATURANCE consortium, to have the opportunity to connect our colleagues from industry with the amazing networks and experts from across academia and the third sector. So I think it's going to be a fantastic opportunity to get an insight to the cutting-edge research on nature-based solutions, and particularly on the disaster risk reducing role that natural ecosystems can play.
Yes, my name is Joanne Linneruth Beyer, and I work at the International Institute of Applied Systems Analysis, IASA, that's located just outside of Vienna, Austria. I think NATURANCE offers a very timely and very important step for bringing together both the researchers and the insurers to develop something very innovative in addressing and actually supporting nature-based solutions. There's a lot of projects out there and experiments, and I think they haven't quite come to fruition yet, and I think we can really support that process.
My name is Max Tesselaar. I'm from the Institute for Environmental Studies, the Free University in Amsterdam. I'm looking forward to this project, particularly to work closely together with the industry and stakeholders. I think it will produce a very usable output. I expect well, to obtain scientific results that are practical, that show sensitivities to real issues also in industry, insurance industry, and also in the financing of nature-based solutions in general.
My name is Victor Rötzer. I'm a research fellow at the London School of Economics. I'm organizing and facilitating the innovation labs, where we're trying to bring together practitioners like insurers and people from local government together with researchers from the project. I think it's very important to bring everyone at a table, for example, insurers as like risk managers, as society's risk managers, together with people who actually implement these measures. As like researchers have really good ideas, but many of them like never get to implement into practice. So I'm really proud to work on this part of the project to bring this the great innovations from the project into practice.
Hello, my name is Nicolas Fèvre. I worked for the European Research Executive Agency at the Commission in Brussels, and I'm the project advisor of NATURANCE. So the costs from climate-related hazards have increased over Europe over the last century, and they will further rise. And their impact actually on Europe's economy, environment, and also societies, so will further increase under like the future projection of climate change. Nature-based solution can help to sustainably manage this risk and to help also address these social environmental challenges such as climate hazard risk, pollution, biodiversity loss, and the NATURANCE project. So in this picture, we'll actually assess the technical, financial, but also operational feasibility and performance of this solution.
Okay, to 2:30 p.m. So I would like to invite people to rejoin the session. I see some are logging in again. Some of you maybe had the chance to see the video of the NATURANCE project. Maybe we can share the link to the video in the chat for everyone. Maybe some of them didn't have the chance to watch the whole video. I guess, thank you, perfect. I guess Laura is going to share the screen again, and then we can pick it up from where we left. So welcome back. We will start now with session 2. So I'm going to invite Victor Rützer from LSE to tell us about NATURANCE's approach of the innovation labs. So Victor, the word is with you.
Hi, hi again. Thank you very much. For the next 10 minutes or so before we actually hear the first pitch of one of our 3 innovation labs that will present, to introduce you a bit to the idea behind the innovation labs that sort of like are at the core of the NATURANCE Innovation Lab approach. To start with, and then maybe we can jump to the next slide. Can we go 2 slides forward? I think 1 slide forward. I think we had like a... Yes, that's the one. Okay, before I talk about the innovation lab itself, I wanted to quickly sort of like clarify or sort of like define like what actually is an innovation. What do we understand as an innovation? I'm referring here to the Austrian economist Josef Schumpeter, who is often seen as sort of like the godfather of like modern innovation theory. And what sort of like from one of his early works, the theory of economic development, is as the innovation, the practical implementation of ideas that result in the introduction of new goods and services or improvements in offering goods or services. So that means what I also showed at the bottom, it doesn't equal what's often understood an invention, which I think in this case, for example, the telephone, which is a completely new technology, and so what does something that you couldn't do before, speaking over long distances, and innovation, which I think is here picture on the right and the left with the iPhone. It's like something that's essentially a phone with like merged together a few other features in an innovative new package, but it's not necessarily a new technology, but sort of it's basically bringing together several technologies into a new user interface. And that's what we're also trying with NATURANCE. So like a lot of the good ideas and like technologies are already out there, and we're trying to bring them together to shape new innovative ideas and products. And next slide, please. And the types of innovation can be quite different. We sort of like used here like an definition from one of the innovation lab concepts by UNICEF, and they make the distinction between 4 different innovations. One is in programs, so anything that worked with vulnerable regions or communities and how they could benefit from nature-based solutions and insurance. Innovation in the product itself, so any like new insurance product, for example, be it sort of like an investment vehicle, or be it sort of like a new way of insuring nature-based solutions. We could also think of innovation in processes, so everything that improves or increases efficiencies in cases where sort of like we already have a product, but it's like not really scaled or not working as efficient as it could be. Or last but not least, in partnerships, and what we're also trying to facilitate here, bringing together new stakeholders or stakeholders that previously not worked together to create these innovative solutions. Next slide, please. So what is an actual innovation lab? So innovation labs come in all different shapes or forms. It's can be a physical or virtual space. But the key is it should allow for collaboration between different sectors and partners, and I will also talk to this part a bit more in the next slides. It should be a safe space. It should be a safe space for the participants, and also have like allow for the freedom to challenge dominant ideas and also hear diverse voices. I think you probably all have had this, that some of the questions you don't dare to ask are usually the good ones. And the format of this innovation lab for the NATURANCE Innovation Lab specifically comprises of a series of workshops. They are flexible in its format, but sort of like the time frame is set also by the project. So we will have the innovation labs run between 6 and 9 months. And the main outcome of each innovation lab will be a business case analysis that sort of like that really shows sort of like how the innovation can be implemented and scaled. And we will get this out of all of these innovation labs. There will also something that helps us prioritizing of like which of these ideas, innovations are actually viable and can be used or directly picked up, for example, by the insurance industry and implemented as an innovation. Next slide, please. Who takes part of in an innovation lab? I've just sort of picked up some groups that can obviously more or different sectors. We can think of like the private sector, which includes sort of like private insurers, the government and public sector, academia, community groups, land and property owners, and NGOs. And the important thing, and that's also referred to in sort of like one of the key features of innovation labs, is that it's like a wide range and cross-cutting group of people from different industries, professions, and cultures. And in the Stanford Social Innovation Review, this is described as an unusual bunch. So I think we really want to make sure that we hear all different voices and people who usually not speak to each other, because that's where we believe innovation happens. Next slide, please. In the NATURANCE project, the Innovation Lab, it's really at the heart of the project, and you've seen the figure on the right-hand side before. So it's really trying to bring together all these different aspects of NATURANCE, the network of existing networks, the different themes we're working on, as well as sort of like the evidence and government work that is happening in the project. And this will all like come together in these innovation labs. And so like we will try to boil it down to innovative solutions that can then be picked up. Each consortium partner, which are 9 in total, will be the host of one of the innovation labs. As I said, the innovation labs will run 6 to 9 months, 3 at a time. So, and what we hear today and tomorrow with the 3 pitches kicks off our first cohort of innovation labs, who will then sort of like start working over the next 6 to 9 months. Next slide, please. We'll cover 3 themes in the innovation labs. Nature-based solutions for risk transfer, so like what we usually understand under, or like most people understand under insurance. So the new innovations that combine nature-based solution and risk transfer. You can think of ensuring like green infrastructure or natural flood management projects. Nature-based solution for investment. So how can we, what are innovative financial products that can attract investments from insurers, as well as advisory. So like how can we create innovative services, tools, and technologies that allow insurers to advise their clients on how to invest and manage their risk using nature-based solutions. Next slide, please. The Innovation Lab takes several steps, and sort of like this is the first step, is sort of like developing the actual idea of the Innovation Lab, and we call this the Innovation Lab development journey. It starts with what we have today, the lab pitch, where we sort of like introduce the theme of the lab, trying to gain your attention, because we also want to have your participation. And if you have interest in the lab, please reach out to the individual leads of the head, and also to get your input. In the second stage, we're going to define the stakeholders, as well as the research needs. What evidence do we have? What evidence do we need? As well, decide on the format. In the pilot phase, we narrow down the focus area and refine the concept of the innovation lab before we talk about operational details, about what people do we actually need, who can join the innovation lab. What space do we want? Is it virtual? Is it in person? As well as the activities that we want to do that create innovation in these labs. And then in the 5th step, reporting and dissemination, like how will be these outcomes of the lab reported and how they will be disseminated. Next slide, please. What I've just talked about was the pre-lab phase, so the development of the innovation lab, and then sort of like we dive right into the innovation lab itself. And here we have sort of like the adapted double diamond model for product design, which is sort of developed by Benethy in 1996 and like picked up by the British Design Council. And the idea is like combining divergent and convergent thinking processes. So like exploring the problem, discovering the problem in a first step, in a like diverging process before we converge, again, sort of like narrow it down to a specific problem definition. Then we sort of like in the next step, sort of like, again, like widen our thinking in developing potential innovative solutions before we like sort of like focus on specific solution that seems to be the most promising. and sort of like have a sort of like outcome solution, which then sort of like would feed into what we call the post-lab phase, where we report, scale, and disseminate these innovations, and that will also lead into the compendium as like one of the key outputs at the end of the project, and that would can be used so like as an sort of like open source repository for innovative insurance and nature-based solution ideas. Next slides, please. So what we do now, and so like we will have from the 9 innovation labs, we have the first round of 3 presenting today and tomorrow. And we're going to hear the first one today, right after this presentation. And then tomorrow morning, we're going to hear Lab 2 by IIASA and Lab 3 by LSE, before we then go into the parallel breakout sessions, where you have to pick which of the 3 topics are most interesting to you and are most relevant to you, and where you think you could also contribute in the discussions, but also if you consider joining the innovation lab, which is the one where you think you can bring your skills in and where you also think there's like something to be learned. And with that, I would like to close and hand over back to Daniela to welcome our first innovation lab pitch.
Thank you, Victor. I think this is really inspiring, also using the model of the diamond, and you showing us this conceptual framework of how the innovation labs are going to happen and how different groups are going to contribute for us to create really interesting outputs for nature-based solutions and insurance. So you heard that the NATURANCE project is starting with 3 innovation labs, but today you're going to get knowing the first one. It's about methods to quantify flood risk reductions and co-benefits of NBIS in the Netherlands. But please make sure that you're also here tomorrow to hear about the other 2 labs and for us to dive into the breakout sessions and work together. So now I invite Guillermo Garcia from the Institute for Environmental Studies from the Vrije Universiteit Amsterdam. He will tell us about the work being done in this Dutch innovation lab. And after he speaks, we will also hear about what Max Tesselaar is going to tell us, also from the Vrije Universiteit in Amsterdam. So both speakers. Thank you. Welcome to stage, Guillermo.
Thank you, Daniela, for the introduction, and thank you, Victor, for the presentation. Yeah, as Daniela mentioned, I'm Guillermo Garcia. I'm a PhD candidate at the Institute for Environmental Studies at the Vrije Universiteit in Amsterdam. And today I will be presenting the innovation lab that we are proposing for the NATURANCE project. As Daniela mentioned, we will focus on the methods for quantifying flood risk reduction and co-benefits of nature-based solutions. In this way, so we can accurately quantify the economic benefits and potentially support financing of nature-based solution and mainstream for financing scheme for nature-based solutions. And can you go to the next slide, please? I will give a brief historical context to start. As most of you, I guess, will remember, in 2021, there was a severe episode of flooding in Europe, starting 12th of July in the UK, where extreme rainfall started to cause severe problems to the infrastructure. And also a couple of days later, as you can observe in the map in the right-hand side, which is from the global forecast system, but the source of this image is from the BBC. There was extreme rainfall in the border between Belgium, Netherlands, and Germany. And to put this into perspective, this was one of the worst natural disasters of the last 50 years. In particular, in Germany, it was the worst disaster since 1962, and also some worse than some episodes of flooding in 1993 and 1995 in the south of the Netherlands. Also, it broke precipitation records in Belgium and so on. The consequences were quite devastating, and at least 243 people died from the floods. And the insured losses were roughly estimated to be around 2.5 billion and total damages up to 10 billion euros. Right now, and why we think Limburg is a good example, example for this innovation lab, is because there is a current project that is being taken place that is called the Future FRM Tech project. which is focusing on developing nature-based solutions and hybrid solutions for flood risk management in Limburg and in other places of the country, and both for coastal and also for river flooding. And they're designing water storage system for the river, also dunes. They have multiple different methods that they are assessing, and that could also be really relevant to discuss in our innovation lab. Can we go to the next slide, please? I will very briefly summarize the benefits of nature-based solutions, since I think we've already discussed, but they have two main streams of benefits. One, on the one hand, is the risk reduction benefits, which it's mainly refers to the avoided damage to climate risk reduction. For example, mangroves can lower the impact of coastal flooding through infiltration water storage, and this can lead to less economic losses or destruction of crops or infrastructure damage. And to measure this, the most commonly used methods are catastrophe models, which are a function of hazard, exposure, and vulnerability. So the exposure means the location who will be affected by the event, the hazard is the actual event itself, and also with which nature-based solutions can help to reduce the impact. And the vulnerability is the susceptibility to the damage and the likelihood of the damage. So these are the current methods that we will assess in the innovation lab. And on the other hand, the co-benefits are really important because they materialize even if in absence of disaster, but they are also quite challenging to value, because some of them have market values, and we can estimate it through the reduction in, for example, tourism. If there is a very popular coral reef and people go scuba diving, and then this is degraded, and then the loss of tourism revenue can be used to estimate co-benefits, but also some other co-benefits, they are not provide no market value, such as recreation or aesthetic value. And this has to be, the main common methods are through stated preference service that we will discuss in a minute. So we believe that both sides are really important and should be taken into account for an accurate assessment of the total benefits of nature-based solutions, and also being really important to identify who benefits from each of these benefits, right? From the risk reduction benefits being the insurance companies, or maybe also the local community, which also benefit from the co-benefit side. So understanding how this works and how this relationship is shaped is really important to develop financing schemes and have a better understanding of nature-based solutions as a whole. Can we go to the next slide, please? Yeah. So very briefly, the first element is the risk reduction side. I have put an example there from a paper that was published a couple of years ago that looks at the hydrological model, looks at a forest protection scenario and a continued deforestation scenario, and they found out that the forest cover was quite effective in reducing the damage from smaller storms, which are also the most frequent ones. And this is an example of how nature-based solutions can help reduce the hazard from climate risk events, and how the methods can help to assess what is the actual potential. So we will review this kind of studies in our lab, the existing models, and we will also use the stakeholders that we will present later to co-design improved methods, as we believe that having the input from the stakeholders is really relevant to design improved methods for assessing nature-based solutions. And the next slide refers to the co-benefit side, which is also a bit tricky to measure because, as I mentioned, not all co-benefits have a market value that we can consider. The most common methods is the state preference service for non-market valuation, which measures individual values through service. And with these state preferences, there's contingent valuation and also choice experiment, which is the one we would like to focus because we believe it's a bit more complex and also offers real trade-offs. Contingent valuation asks directly to the respondent how much they're willing to pay for a certain ecosystem service or good, and or how much they're willing to accept to for it to disappear. But choice experiment creates these scenarios, as you can observe in the choice card on the right-hand side. And it has three main characteristics. One is the three main elements. One is the characteristics, or they're called attributes, which are in the circle in green. In this case, coral health, number of fish species, water clarity, all these different co-benefits. In this case for coral reefs, which is the example that I put there, we have on the left-hand side without mitigation scenario and the right-hand side with mitigation. So as you can observe in the with mitigation scenario, the levels, which is which is highlighted in blue, is like a higher degree of existing services compared to the without mitigation scenario. But of course, this comes at a price, which in this case is a personal tax, which is one of the most common payment vehicles in choice experiments, but it's not the only one. So the respondents need to consider whether they think that the trade-off is fair for them, or in this way we can understand the underlying hierarchy between the preferences and understand what the respondents believe to be the price they'd like to pay to preserve nature. There's of course some challenges, and even if it's a very common method and can be a very policy relevant, since you can adjust your scenarios to the policy you're designing. There are some questions to the validity and realism of these choices. There's the hypothetical bias theory that says that sometimes the respondents do not represent the real preferences, and this is quite interesting because actually happens in both directions, in the way that, for example, for some transport preference studies, the hypothetical willingness to pay is actually lower than the real willingness to pay once the policy takes place. And for some public goods or environmental conservation policies, the hypothetical willingness to pay, so what they report in the survey, is actually higher than when their actual willingness to pay is. So this is one of the main challenges that need to be addressed. Also the external validity, because choice experiment results vary very much from case study to case study. So it is quite difficult to apply the results to different regions in the world or different nature-based solutions. That's why we need other methods such as meta-analysis and developing value transfers. But the improvement of these methods will need to be crucial for understanding the co-benefits of nature-based solutions. Can we go to the next slide, please? And this is the summary slide. So I've explained why we believe this innovation lab can be useful for the NATURANCE project, because we need to improve our flood management, as it was clear in the 2021 summer floods. And we believe that the realistic to accurately value nature-based solutions, we require stakeholder input, and we would like to co-design improved methods for assessing flood risk reduction and the co-benefits. To do so, we will work in workshops, interviews, and discussions with some key stakeholders that are listed in the right-hand side of the slide. They're all based in the Netherlands in this case. We have Achmea, which is the largest Dutch property insurer, the Dutch Association of Insurers, and some private and public sector actors, as well as some researchers. The reason why the international stakeholders come with a question mark is because we'll use this platform to also advertise in case some international stakeholders would like to take part of this innovation lab, or just want to have some questions or get in contact with us. We will be more than happy, and we encourage you to do so, because we would like to generalize the lessons learned in this innovation lab to not only the Netherlands, but maybe European level or even more. So of course, knowing all perspectives is really useful. And the next slide is just we can go to the next slide, is just the contact information, which is the IBM team of the NATURANCE project. It includes me, Wouter Botsen, a professor who spoke before, and he's also an environmental economist, and Max Tesselar, which I will hand over to him actually now for the end of our presentation. Thank you so much for your attention, and have a lovely day.
Thank you, Guillermo, for this presentation. So I will take over. I'm Max. I'm a colleague of Guillermo working on the NATURANCE project. And I will, in this little time that we have left for this session, like to invite two experts to briefly reflect on the presentation given by Guillermo. So the first expert is Dr. Hans de Moel, who's an assistant professor at the Institute for Environmental Studies at the Free University in Amsterdam. And he's an expert in climate risk assessment, including hydrological modeling, land use change, and the modeling of hurricanes. So Hans, could you briefly reflect on the importance of fine-tuning flood risk modeling in Limburg and the assessment of risk reduction resulting from nature-based solutions in this area?
Yeah, of course, Max. So first off, happy to be here with the NATURANCE family, so to speak. So my colleague, but then from the more from the hazard side, from more the water and hydrology, we do a lot of flood risk modeling, also in the future FRM project, as Guillermo already showed. And on your question, Max, I think it's when it comes to nature-based solutions, there's a couple of things which I've seen in the past in some past projects. And that's it. We know the processes. We know that they have a positive influence, but exactly quantifying the size of that influence from an individual measure, but also B, from the entire system, that's where it becomes much more complicated. But it's also where it becomes very important. For instance, we had a project in Amsterdam here on blue-green roofs, so roofs where we store water on top of the roof to prevent pluvial flooding. And there we saw that that it worked very well. It could keep out a lot of the water, but we also saw that the water board, who are responsible for pluvial flooding in Amsterdam, they were a bit reluctant to put it into their formal system. They more saw it as an add-on, and it really is associated with with having certainty in how much does it actually decrease the risk, and that has to do with how much does it physically decrease the risk, but also for instance, the maintenance in this aspect. So these blue-green roofs, that had to do with the maintenance of the roofs, which is not the water board, but the owner of the roof. And when we think about Limburg and the floods there and nature-based solutions there, you may have measures, in forested areas or on the land of farmers, and you need to know how that entire system works, and B, you also need to know that it's maintained in a proper way.
Great, thanks, Hans. So I guess if you compare the nature-based solutions to the more traditional flood protection standards, for example, or flood protection measures, then the uncertainty is sort of a demotivating factor.
Yeah, and the difficulty with getting those co-benefits properly quantified, right? Because that's very clear for engineers, but when it comes to recreation and carbon storage and all those extra co-benefits, it's a lot less clear.
Thanks, Hans. Then I would like to invite the second expert, Daan van Ederen, who's a researcher of climate-related financial risks at Achmea, which is the largest property insurer in the Netherlands. And he's also a PhD candidate at our institute. So Daan, well, given your perspective of working at a large property insurer, how important is it to know the risk reduction from nature-based solutions for insurers to become actively involved in stimulating the uptake of nature-based solutions?
Yes, good afternoon, Max and Guillermo. Thank you for the presentation. Also, thank you for the question. Yeah, as said, I'm also a PhD researcher at the IVM and a employee of Achmea, doing research on climate-related financial risks. And yeah, from the perspective of an insurer, I think that quantifying the risk reduction potential of nature-based solutions is crucial to develop a business case for investing in these nature-based solutions. Similar to, for instance, initiating the process of a new type of flood insurance. An insurer needs to know exactly what the costs of those future floods will be in order to price their premiums correctly. So yeah, therefore I strongly think that the success of involving insurance companies in the nature-based solution creations depends on a correct quantification of both the costs and the benefits of these nature-based solutions.
Thanks, Dan. Do you see any other opportunities or obstacles, well, from your perspective at Achmea, for getting involved in nature-based solution finance?
Well, I think these innovation hubs themselves are very interesting and important to get those private players around the table and have a good think with them about these questions. And at the end of the day, insurers are basically in the business of correctly estimating costs and benefits, and therefore, they're quite keen to know the developments on these on these processes. So I think that would be a major benefit.
Thanks, Dan. So I think we're in the end of our session. So I will, well, I'd like to thank Hans and Dan for participating in this discussion, although very briefly. Yeah, Daniela, I will hand the floor back to you.
Thank you, Max. Thank you, Hans and Dan. It's really, really interesting to hear from professionals working with insurance directly and hear a bit about the opportunities and the challenges. I am sure that you were able to gain a lot of audience for your breaking room tomorrow by presenting today your Dutch Innovation Lab. Thanks, Guillermo, as well. I didn't mention you because I was just seeing in the screen Max, Hans, and Dan, but thank you as well for your very good presentation on the lab and the details you shared. Yeah, so with this, I'm now going to pass the word to my colleague, Laura Pirasan Palomar. So Laura is going to drive the WebStival session on knowledge networks. Laura, yeah.
Well, thank you, Dani. Thank you very much, and for all this fabulous moderation so far. And thank you very much also our speakers and our panelists today. It's been very, very insightful and very inspiring as well. Yes, for the moment, I'm going to present this session. Let me share a second my screen. And we are going to talk about the joining forces session. So Alice already was introducing us what is the work that we are doing as part of the NATURANCE project. So what we are trying to do here is to create this network of networks, this NATURANCE network. And the idea for us is that here you can see the structure of the network that we are having so far with with the 4 lines of knowledge that we identified in the project that are important to bridge the knowledge between all 4. So as Alice was also mentioning, there is a network champion. There is one member of our consortium who is leading each knowledge network as an expert. But the idea is to bring all these 4 together in different type of initiatives, programs, or projects. And also, for example, as you just saw, the innovation labs in this case. So for this opportunity today, we invited for our first joining forces session 4 speakers, 4 experts in these 4 topics. Of course, we wanted to try to find the way that we speak different topics that they connect together, and they invite also for different discussions afterwards. So we have today Yaro. You already have the opportunity to meet him, Pina Gervasi, Dennis Colentine, and Andrew Bauer. So I will pass the floor on the first place to Yaro. I believe you will be able to share your screen. So I will stop sharing mine, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Laura. So I will be presenting the work of the coalition that is called Ecosystem for Disaster Risk Reduction and Adaptation, PEDR network. Just Laura, can you confirm that you see my presentation in full presentation?
I confirm.
Brilliant, brilliant. So this presentation has been prepared by the Secretariat of the PEDR and by Nathalie Doswald. And now I'm happy to give it as the outgoing chair of this partnership, and Nathalie will take over at the end of this month as the chair. So PEDR is a coalition established in 2008, and it includes many UN agencies, international organizations, or research centers, including my research center, Euro-Mediterranean Center on Climate Change. And this is wide and very broadly constructed coalition has certain ideas in common and certain interest in common, and this is first to promote and network in to advance the ecosystem disaster risk reduction or ecosystem-based adaptation or nature-based solutions. We are using all those terms because for political reasons and in different political venues, there are preferences. So we cover all of them under the umbrella. Might be nature-based solution, but in many cases, eco-DRR is preferred. And the scope of this collaboration is to conduct research, develop joint proposal, promote policies, do policy advocacy. The whole network involves many institutions and is organized globally at the global level, as well as regionally across the different continents. So the priorities that we have been following over the past period was definitely advancing science and knowledge, and there are clearly links to NATURANCE project, as I will show in a second, strengthening the capabilities of the institutions, and also preparing the ground for upscaling nature-based solution and ecosystem DRR solutions, and policy advocacy and mainstreaming. So this is how we imagine the ecosystem-based approaches. This comes from a very influential publication. So it includes different concepts, including green infrastructure, blue infrastructure, initiatives like landscape restoration, wetland restoration, and so on. So we are inclusive in terms of what we are looking at, as long as there's a mutually beneficial goal of advancing nature conservation or restoration and disaster risk reduction. So here are some examples of our recent work that you can see we have developed together with UNDRR. Andrew will talk about the initiative of UNDRR, but together we developed also the words into action guidance on how to design nature-based intervention, how to assess and how to implement them. But we have also published together and based on contribution from many members of the network, also in scientific high-level journals like Nature Sustainability. This article looked particularly into the evidence and assessed the evidence-based supporting the claim that nature-based solution can deliver in terms of disaster risk reduction. They are tangible effect, and there is a materiality in terms of the financial matter when it comes to designing interesting innovation and finance instrument. But there are many other publications that we have covered over the past year. So the collaboration is also a platform for outreach. So we have plenty of subscribers. We are present at a number of social platforms and are followed by a huge audience across the globe, and I will show a few examples of those. We are producing and improving access to latest news, organizing webinars, podcasts, write journal articles, and share opportunities for job. There are really a number of interesting contribution. Pedro has also submitted the contribution to the midterm review of Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction 2015-2030, for example, among many others. What is interesting, we are also developing training material for students or young practitioners. This massive online course is still available until the end of August this year. It also offers you the opportunity to receive a UN certificate upon completion of this course, and it has been taken and followed by many people across the whole globe. So this is an interesting example of how Pedro, as the global, let's say, platform for eco-DRR and nature-based solution for disaster risk reduction, can mobilize the resources, can help to share the knowledge, and can contribute to similar project like NATURANCE. Yeah, We have also a master program that is designed specifically for or implemented by different universities and so on. And we are organizing a number of webinars. One of those was organized together with NATURANCE. That was at the end of March, about the new global biodiversity framework that was attended by, I believe, more than 1,000 people across the globe. But there are many others, and this is an example of very influential and very interesting collaborative network for nature-based solutions. As such, it really provides a number of opportunities to follow. One of those is a side event that is being organized within the context of G20, and this is going to look into how to practically apply the ecosystem-based approaches for DRR. So we have contributed a number of
Maybe we are having a connection problem. Let's give a couple of seconds.
I guess we can go on, Laura. I
Yes.
think he was wrapping up.
All right. Yes. Yeah. So then we need just to be able now again to share our screens. Yeah, but definitely this is a very, very interesting information that we can all as participants and members of our networks as well to get in contact with PEDR. I think it's a very well-known partnership, and many of us, we have been able to participate as well in some of their programs for learning as well. Well, right now then we are going to introduce to our second panelist today, our second expert. She is Pina Gervasi. She is the Climate and Restoration Director for the Forest Stewardship Council. Pina, we are very much thankful because you are here. We've been following your work, and we are very pleased that you are here. I believe that you also are able to share your screen.
Thank you very much, and thanks NATURANCE for the invitation to present today. I will try to share my screen. If I have any problem, I will let you know, but I think. Can you see it now?
Yes, we do.
Okay, great. So, oh, sorry. Yeah, okay. So I will start my presentation talking about the types of risks that are connected to nature loss and how these risks also relate to the work that we do in FSC as the leader certification standard for responsible forest management. So if we talk about financial risks, there are three main that are connected to nature loss. One is the physical risks, of course, when environmental assets are damaged in a way that they cannot deliver ecosystem services any longer. And this is where FSC has developed a new normative framework to extend the certification of forests from timber, non-timber forest products to ecosystem services. In particular, when we talk about physical risks in connection to forests, of course, deforestation, it's one of the key elements that are now being discussed broadly with the new EUDR legislation in the European Union. Biodiversity loss and climate change as, some of the most critical challenges we're facing. The transition risks are the forces that connect to policy, regulation, market, or economy drivers that would affect that we go into a transition for a nature positive future. And in that sense, FSC being a market-driven tool and standard can make a difference as well, supporting corporates and the financial sector to demonstrate that they are actually delivering on their climate and sustainability efforts. Another risk is regarding the image and credibility of the corporate sector, because businesses are vulnerable to greenwashing claims. That means alleging that they are overstated their positive environmental performance or underreported their negative impacts. I want to say that there are many efforts being done to develop and test metrics for disclosure of nature-related financial risks, such as the recommendations of the Task Force on Nature-Related Financial Disclosures, the TNFD. We are now participating in the consultation of the forest guidance that TNFD is developing. And the third type of risk is, of course, a liability risk, which imply potential litigations of affected parties and stakeholders. So in consideration of those risks and the resultant financial risk relates, of course, to insurance, to credit, to market, to liquidity and businesses. The next one, please. Oh, sorry, I am doing it. Okay. So what is the importance of nature? There is a recent study by the Nature Conservancy that shows that ecological forestry techniques could reduce residential insurance premiums by 41% in wildlife risk areas in northern Sierra Nevada. And this type of studies have also been emerging lately. And in this graphic, you can see the level of investments done for different ecosystem services, being biodiversity law and biodiversity one of the biggest, let's say, investment sectors. However, there's still a lack of metrics to identify how these investments are actually impacting positively on biodiversity conservation and restoration. Forest carbon finance, of course, you know that the carbon markets for nature-based solutions are emerging significantly, in particular over the last 5 years, from 2018 to 2022, for about 50 or 60% growth on the purchase of carbon credits from forests and nature-based solutions. Watershed services, which is also a very important ecosystem service, of course, and others such as recreation and soil protection. So FSC in 2019 launched a new framework to verify positive impacts on ecosystem services from sustainable forest management and conservation that includes 5 key ecosystem services: biodiversity conservation, carbon sequestration and storage, watershed services, soil conservation, and recreational services. Over the past 4 years after the procedure, it's called the Ecosystem Services Procedure, was launched, we have been able to reach more than 2 million hectares, in particular for conservation and restoration of ecosystem services globally. And these forest management operations are demonstrating through verified impacts on the ground that their management through FSC is actually delivering positive impacts on those. The procedure is being reviewed at the moment, and it will include as well cultural values, which means values that are delivered by indigenous peoples and local communities in forest areas. So what does FSC have to offer to the financial sector, and what are the key actions that we believe can support the reduction of risk, but also other topics such as advancing more financial flows, getting more credibility in the market, and building awareness to civil society and consumers. So in terms of awareness by civil society and consumers, we believe that certification standards can incentivize nature-positive behaviors over society. And I want to mention that in our last market study, we identified that we now have about 50% on global brand recognition worldwide, being, of course, some of the most advanced European markets, such as the Netherlands, with like 90% of recognition of the FSC brand, but also very promising figures from developing regions such as Latin America and Asia, with countries in Latin America having more than 70% brand recognition for FSC certified products, for example. So we are in a very good position to support the changing of behavior and also the awareness of people in connection to the links of forest deforestation and climate change. We also can innovate in asset protection. We are innovating in asset protection, which is a key element for the insurance sector. I mean, through the maintenance of those ecosystem services and then demonstration of positive impacts on the ground. We believe that the insurance sector can leverage their insuring on natural infrastructure. For example, in coastal Mexico, tourism businesses, property owners, and local municipalities partner to purchase parametric catastrophe insurance that protects 160 kilometers of coral reef against damages from storms. And this has proved to bring cost-effective solutions in relation to the investments required to maintain that coral reefs. For example, it's estimated that the cost of these repairs in a traditional scenario would cost between $50,000 to $150,000 US. And that cost is much lower than artificial measures, such as building seawalls, which would cost, for example, about $1 million for half a mile. So building and ensuring natural infrastructure could support and reduce the costs for maintaining those ecosystems. We can also support the financial sector on facilitating capital flows. So in that sense, we are partnering with financial institutions, investment banks, the traditional banking sector. So we support through certification these connections and alliances that can support sharing risk or de-risking on forest investments. For example, AXA Group launched their natural capital strategy with an objective of investing more than 2 billion euros in forest conservation, forest restoration, and sustainable forest management over the coming years. And I would like to stress here that a challenge that we are eager to also address is about smallholders, communities, and indigenous peoples that manage forests, because as you know, they are not just subject to traditional financial loans. And it's very difficult to prove the sustainability of these projects and scalability of these projects over time. Finally, the collaboration with stakeholders, and in particular, collaboration with governments, is a key element. We are now working to address the challenges that government have in relation to their nationally determined contribution towards the Paris Agreement, and in particular, considering the amount of investment that is happening in restoration and how governments are developing their national restoration plans regarding forests in important regions in the world. And finally, I want to say, in connection to this importance to develop alliances and partnerships and work in a multi-sectoral approach, I want to say that reporting on sustainability, of course, has become one of the key elements for the corporate sector and the financial sector lately, beyond ESG reporting towards Sustainable Development Goals reporting. And we believe that certification is an element that is not necessarily reporting, and that both certification standard and reporting platforms could work together to make this reporting on sustainability and climate targets more credible in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Pina. This is very, very interesting, the presentation that you just gave, especially because I think most of us, we recognize the brand, but it's also very, very interesting how all these different aspects that you are working with are putting all together, and like considering the markets as well, but also fighting against deforestation, and of course also the importance of meeting with the stakeholders' needs as well. And we are very looking forward for hearing more about you and the discussion that we are going to have after the next speaker. So if we are able to stop sharing the screen, then we'll invite our next speaker. Thank you, Pina. Sorry, we're going to invite Andrew Bauer. Andrew is part of the UN office, but in the Department of Disaster Risk Reduction, and he is also involved with the Make Cities Resilience 2030, and we are very, very excited as well to hear more about the work that you've been doing, and afterwards then we're gonna wrap up with a discussion between all you three speakers in this session. So welcome, Andrew, and the floor is yours.
Dear Laura, thank you very much. I hope you can hear me okay. I can hear you and see you fine, so things work on my end. Great. I'll just share my screen quickly so I can have a couple of supporting slides to accompany my few words. If you give me 1 second. You are, so you should be seeing my slides here. Yes. I was going to start off with a context about the importance of why we're sitting here together and the reality of what we do, but I will actually do that and take an extra minute just to show visually a number of quite striking figures that demonstrate not necessarily the impacts of specific shocks. What I want to illustrate here is two things. First of all, that disaster risk and the impact of disasters and hazards and stresses is increasing in trends, is increasing in terms of the number of events that we see worldwide due to climate change, and is also increasing in terms of impact. And we see here a set of figures that demonstrate that from one decade to the next, the overall impact on economy, on humans, on the environment has substantially increased over time. And this complicated graph demonstrating here a balance is actually quite straightforward in what it tries to say, meaning that the system is increasingly complex. The stresses and shocks that we face are increasingly complex, and in contexts that we currently see in terms of the impacts to climate change. But when this is also exacerbated by conflict, as we see with the war in Ukraine, or other forms of shocks, man-made or nature-related, sometimes the mitigating factors are not sufficient, and the system is overwhelmed. So we end up with systemic impacts, a systemic impact, a systemic crisis as a result of disasters, and in which case the importance of finding the right solutions. And I think here we're delighted to join the NATURANCE discussions and the work being put together with this network to try and see how, both on the financing side, but also with the work of local authorities around solutions linked to the environment, to nature-based solutions, we can move forward together in that respect. Very briefly, just to remind everyone as to what is being put together and driven at a global level, which is supporting all the work that is being done in projects such as this one, and why these networks are really accompanied by a global UN dynamic. In 2015, we had the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction that set out a set of goals around a certain set of priorities with the objectives of seeing certain reductions and increases in either impacts in parts of the reductions, increases in terms of measures taken to enhance the resilience of our societies. In terms of the priorities, I probably I'll point you to the orange box you see on the screen, which is really around on 4 priorities around the investments for disaster risk reduction and for resilience, and looking at, in terms of the targets, the fact that yes, we're looking for solutions whether it is through governance systems, but also in the way we equip ourselves with the right types of tools, early warning systems, the right types of resilient infrastructures to see a reduction of the impacts of these disasters moving forward. One of the reasons we were delighted to accept this invitation is that we are at a very important moment in this international process. A few weeks ago, we held a high-level meeting convened by the President of the General Assembly of the United Nations in New York to discuss the midterm review of the Sendai framework. Countries joined together and unanimously agreed on a political declaration moving forward. So a fantastic re-injection of dynamism in this whole international process. And I just wanted to flag here, not all, but some snapshots of findings, which I think are relevant to the discussions that we have here, which I think are a really strong message to back up the work that ICLEI, that colleagues in Jaroslav's team, and many others in this network will be doing and are doing in the respective areas of work we just heard. In terms of achievements, we're seeing that globally there's a general increase in improvement of risk knowledge. However, we see that considerations of systemic nature of risk is still limited. And this paradigm shift that we're seeing in some maybe pockets or sectoral areas of work, and we heard quite a few contributions from insurance experts, where there the paradigm shift is taking place. But across the society, that is not necessarily the case. So the possibility of having networks exchange more and consolidate that understanding is critical, particularly in the context of innovative solutions such as nature-based solutions. One of their achievements is we've seen more governance structures being established around the involvement of different ministries in the process. However, a very siloed approach still remains. Responsibilities still remain fragmented. And in our day-to-day work, for example, our main interlocutors are civil protection agencies who may not necessarily be systematically talking to ministries and agencies that would hold portfolios or the ownership of issues around the financing agenda or the nature-based solutions that can accompany these measures. So I think we're trying to bring those dots together, also within the governance structures of both national, but also local level. Finally, investments, finance. We heard a lot about how to attribute impacts to certain costs and how can we measure that better. Globally, the bottom line is we're not investing enough in this area of work. And if we are investing in many areas, we're not too sure about what the risks are associated. Are we increasing risk by certain investments? Are we definitely reducing risk by others? Are we informing our investments with risk information? And I think this is an area of work we'll be working more towards, especially when it comes to try and connect the sectors of environment, biodiversity, and identifying solutions through nature-based solutions towards more resilient infrastructures and systems. I've put here a few areas of way forward that come out of the findings of the midterm review, which I think, again, give a good momentum for the work of this project, a good momentum forward in terms of the discussions, whether it's more on the technicalities of improving our risk analysis capacities, better information evidence, developing decision-making processes, and particularly important, empowering stakeholders at a very local level. And I'll come back to that in a second. All that has to be accompanied with a sustainable risk financing system. Do we have systematic budgets? Are resilient infrastructures invested in? How do we address that in a green and nature-based solutions dimension? Maybe just to chip in an idea of a network that, or information on a network that is contributing to better resilience of cities in this case. And I understand this is one of the pillars of the NATURANCE network that we, I think, would probably very much encourage this network to chip in also and to share experiences with the network of cities in the Making Cities Resilient 2030 initiative. We have a number of partners involved, and we're delighted that ICLEI Europe is co-chairing this initiative in the Europe and Central Asia region. And with that in mind, I think there's a good space here to enhance the awareness of cities about about solutions with nature, how to enhance the protection of biodiversity and of the environment. We have over 1,500 cities worldwide involved in this network. We have 22 champions of this network across the globe, 11 of which are located in Europe and Central Asia. And as I said, this relies really on a strong partnership with each one of these partners you see on screen, injecting information, expertise, dynamics, connecting the dots with some of the networks they work in. And again, I'll finish with a word of appreciation to very good friends at ICLEI who invited us to this session, who have been accompanying this journey very closely, and a kind word to all the other colleagues online. And thank you again for the invitation, Laura. So very looking much forward to the conversations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. That is very, very true. We are working together quite in a few other projects as well, and it's very, 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 very nice that you accepted this invitation for participating today. Yeah, and looking forward as well, like to bridge other partners as well in our NATURANCE networks. So now I invite Pina and Yarrow that you turn on, please, your cameras. And then we start this brief discussion, like a panel of discussion. Like here, as I mentioned before, the idea is that we bring these topics together, because as we were stressing during the whole session, we want these topics to be exchanged, because it's well known from the people that we've been working on different fields, nature-based solutions, risk, and investments. Normally, you don't like find them in a place all together in many occasions. So this is the opportunity that we found to start this conversation. So as first question that I would like to ask to you is, for example, considering your expertise in your organizations as well, or even in a personal way, do you identify any gaps between your field and the others that are here present, and maybe which one can you mention?
Maybe I can start with one of the challenges that we see in being a certification standard. We always talk with a forestry language, with a standard language. And one of the challenges that we see is when we connect with financial institutions and insurance companies, we don't speak the same language, and it's very difficult to translate or to transfer this information from the projects to the investors or the clients. So we're trying to understand how to better facilitate that connections. But I think language, narrative, and common understanding, it's a gap for us. I think the second one that I mentioned before is how to make small scale projects scalable, in particular in areas that are highly sensitive to climate change, biodiversity loss, in areas where there are indigenous peoples, how to make these projects credible but also scalable. And I will leave it like that. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, indeed. Language is a very important aspect for us to start talking between different disciplines, and in our case, our knowledge networks as well. So I believe from Yarrow's perspective, language and knowledge is also, or awareness is also a topic that maybe you can also address.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do so, and apologize for me being disconnected before ending the talk. I was just having 2 more slides to explain. I'm really very sorry. For some reason, we are experiencing internet connection issues. There are a number of issues that I could name from the perspective of the PEDR, and we are trying within the collaboration to address those. So one that is particularly interesting for NATURANCE project is the certified evidence. To systematically collect evidence, assess, identify where the gaps are, including the economic impact, including the impact on the social resilience or social justice principle translated into nature-based solution projects. So the PEDR network participates in a number of policy relevant initiatives, including the role of NBIS project in humanitarian aid and civil protection operation. It's contributing to harnessing the evidence, how much ecosystem restoration can contribute to reducing inequalities of any type, including environmental inequalities and so on. So the evidence side that's particularly relevant for work package 4 is critically important, and this is why part of our efforts in the network were directed to finding out what we know about the economic impacts, to what extent those economic impacts have been demonstrated in the peer-reviewed published scientific literature, and using what methodologies and how to improve and advance this field. The other thing that I would like to mention is, and connecting with what Pina said, it's the lack of standard or agreed design principles. So when we speak about resilience bonds, green bonds, and so on, do we have a common understanding of how those instruments should be built, how they should be implemented, how they could be compared? And this is driven by a sort of bottom-up pre-standards, if you want, shared principles, good practice examples, how these instruments should be brought to the attention of the policymakers, how the design should be advanced with contribution of whom, and how to ensure that the unintended consequences are taken into account and properly assessed. So for this project, NATURANCE project, I think the evidence base to improve and fill the gap is critically important. And the second part is to contribute to those shared principles and design principles for the financial instruments. Over.
Thanks a lot, Yarrow. So then, Andrew, we would like to hear your perspective.
Thank you very much. I think indeed we mentioned it earlier, the fragmentation of the different contributions is something that is a challenge that we're grappling with. It was, and if I take it back 7 years at the start of the Sendai framework, which is our global process, something identified and something that the midterm review reiterated as an element that still needs a lot of work being done by local and national authorities. And maybe to stress the particular challenges at a local level, which unfortunately are not new and are not surprising, that local level really struggle with certain aspects of the work when you're talking about risk financing agendas, whether it is linked to nature-based solutions or the other form of solutions for DRR. There is, generally speaking, a limited access, if not even awareness of available funding out there. How can we manage to stimulate that access to that funding? What would be the right channels to support? How could we overcome, when that knowledge is there, the lack of capacity to develop and implement the projects? It is not necessarily a lack of willingness, it's not a lack of expertise, but simply a lack of time and capacity to do so. You will also see a limited access to finance. How can we ensure that cities who may not be creditworthiness or have the financial resources to engage, overcome those challenges? And of course, down the line, there'll also be a lack of incentive or a lack of information on what financial service providers can do to invest in city level resilience. So I think, again, the conversation is it sounds very straightforward when we sit around here together amongst groups of people expert in the field. But I think when we engage on a day-to-day through the MCR 2030 network with city representatives who, out of a sense of increased vulnerability to disaster risk, wish to do more, but not have necessarily the capacity to do so, how can we take this forward? And I think we're trying to look for one of those answers in ensuring that by bringing ourselves together, the sum of our efforts will be stronger than our individual efforts going forward. And that, I think, may not necessarily be a solution, but may help in overcoming some of the challenges that you've been highlighting and that Yarrow and Pina have already been touching upon. So again, just an element of reflection here, which I hope can maybe stimulate some thinking amongst the participants. Thank you.
Yeah, great. That's definitely very, very, very important points. And I think right now we can see some synergies that we can address all together, for example, as experts here. Yes, Pina.
No, I'm fine. I was just demuting myself.
Oh, okay, no, but well, now I would like to wrapping, taking notes from the things you said, and also I would like also maybe go forward to identify maybe which from your side are the untapped opportunities that you can mention, that you can, for example, can relate with NATURANCE, with the NATURANCE network, and also with the NATURANCE project itself? What do you think it could be these opportunities to address these challenges that you already mentioned?
I can start maybe. I think for us to position and support the use of sustainability standards in the financial sector is one of our priorities. We are now engaged with the Green Bond Principles as observers, with a limited number of NGOs participating in the discussions and technical working groups on sustainability bonds and the use of sustainability standards as well, and climate transition guidance. So we believe that the use of sustainability standards would support strongly reporting on financial disclosure. So that's one. The second one, I think it's how we implement our actions on the ground through real action on the ground. And that means how we better connect investments in insurance activities with the countries and the territories. So we have a network of more than 56 countries and network partners, as we call them, in all the regions in the world that are now supporting this effort of matchmaking investments and projects and identifying the challenges and facilitating these conversations. Well, I can say many more, but I think, using our networks, collaborating better, sharing information, experiences, participating at the high-level discussions of the financial sector are some of the actions that we can uptake.
Yes, exactly, and that's what we are meant to do with these sessions as well, like trying to bring into a discussion these new topics as well. And yeah, for example, which other opportunities you see, for example, from the UNDRR, Andrew?
I think from our side, there are a number, and I think we have a number of instruments on our side where we're trying to bring a little bit more focus on how to support national and local authorities to better understand how the financing can more systematically match the ambitions set in terms of, and the needs identified, and the actions taken towards resilience, towards better resilience building. What we are aiming to do is to enhance the possibility for authorities to better monitor or tag resilience investments that they may plan or may see as part of their public expenditures, looking possibly also to see how cities and national authorities are looking at resilient infrastructures and how investments in that area are risk informed. So an array of different instruments that we put at the disposal of national authorities for supporting them on a case by case. Each country is different, each city is different, and I think that is something that we are trying to grapple with in terms of adapting the right type of approach, and ensuring that at the very least, if the minimum we can do is to create an increased awareness of the topic. And again, this is where we're delighted to be able to join these types of exchanges of information amongst networks, if they can help our respective networks find out more about what's out there and available. And I think the last point, again, on the networks, what we are seeing is also a great interest in peer-to-peer learning. So I think one aspect of the work where we see the most return on investment, to use a relevant word here, but in a non-financial term, is on the possibility of cities exchanging, twinning, learning experiences. We, through the MCR 2030s network, saw those resilience hubs I was talking about earlier accompany certain cities in the region in the process of developing the right frameworks for resilience, in developing their strategies for disaster risk reduction, by exchanging experiences, welcoming visits, and having that peer-to-peer exchange among cities. To some extent, we could have been on the sidelines. The possibility and the success of that achievement was simply to create a space where that exchange could happen. And I think we really look forward, along with ICLEI and partners, to continue and scale up that type of support, because It is time consuming, but it seems to have a very concrete impact on the ground. So we look forward to continue that type of work going ahead. Thank you.
Great, thanks a lot. Well, I want to give the word that Jared wants to share also something.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. And I really appreciate the remarks by Pina and Andrew. I would perhaps start with those opportunities that have been exploited. And Svenja mentioned that in her talk that, you know, some few years ago, if we spoke about nature-based solution and insurance in this connection, nobody would understand. So we have the climate and nature related financial risk frameworks, attention paid to. So there's yeah, I see a lot of progress and a lot of opportunities exploited over the past 10 years. We have the principles of sustainable insurance that they are looking at the ESG criteria of the impact that insurance and other enterprises might have. So there is a growing awareness about the nature as the critical component of the of our society and the fundamental condition for life on the earth. So there's been a lot of progress on so. Even this project that we are talking about and exploring the insurance and nature-based solution is a sign of progress. I think where we see untapped opportunities as the PEDR network is the discussion is still disconnected across the policy initiatives like UNFCCC, Sendai Framework, and the Desertification Convention, Biodiversity Conservation, and so on. So we have different venues where we discuss the role and importance of intervention and finance and implementation of restoration goals and so on. And those venues are sometimes not entirely compatible or are not at the same level of recognizing the importance of shared principles. So there might be a more effort bringing the same level of awareness and the same recognition of nature-based solution, ecosystem, DRR, or ecosystem adaptation to within those international frameworks and initiatives. This is something definitely to be highlighted. I think untapped opportunity is perhaps, again, I would repeat myself, to agree on the shared principles, to ensure that there is a monitoring and robust and agreed monitoring, including for Sendai framework that Andrew suggested and mentioned. So we need specific measurable indicators of progress across the globe. There's the global goal on adaptation being discussed right now at the climate change conference in Bonn. So there is another way of bringing the nature-based solution into international reporting and monitoring framework and demonstrating the progress. I think nature-based solution and financial instruments to restore ecosystem services are also very relevant within the loss and damage initiative under the UNFCCC. But yeah, and a number of others. So it is a cross-cutting topic. It has been on several occasions recognized as the unifying topic across the different policy domains, and we should work towards having a shared understanding and shared principles. Yeah.
Yeah, that's totally right. I think from all of us, that's one point that we definitely need to address, and to have, for example, these monitoring tools, because that is most of the time what we as project or at local level as well, the monitoring and the reporting of what is done, what is going to be done, also in the academia, is kind of a difficulty for knowing and to grab up things that have been made so far. But now, for the last minutes that we have in our session, just from your personal experience, what would you think this is what that we need the most for bringing all this together? Like, to really that you feel that from your experience when you sit in front of this kind of type of discussions, or for example when you are with a friend, when you are trying to explain what you need to do or what is needed to be done for bringing these topics of insurance, disaster risk reduction, and nature-based solutions. If you want to explain to someone that wants to learn, as many of our participants, what is the most important thing that you will say this is what is important to build on?
Maybe I can. Pina, please go ahead.
Thank you. I can start with this role of communicating to consumers and civil society. We have developed a messaging framework that connects forests with climate change and nature-based solutions, and we are actively participating in different platforms. But I think that it's really important to join efforts to communicate to civil society, because sometimes I believe that we are working a lot, in our own spaces, but we are not really making joint efforts to communicate better what are the risks, what are the challenges and threats of climate change to the whole society. And for that, we have set up a coalition. We call it the Climate Coalition, which is a multi-sectoral platform for working together on these specific topics. This is a multi-stakeholder and very diverse in terms of sectors, including the financial sector, the corporate sector, other NGOs, certification standards for carbon and ecosystem services, reporting platforms, project developers, science and research. So if we hear all the voices and improve the dialogue between us, I think it's going to make a difference on how the world perceives us.
Thanks, Pina. You're right. Well, then Andrew, please go ahead.
I assume this is probably one of the final words we'll have. Maybe just to leave you with something that takes us out of our technical discussions here, but which is a growing interest in the networks of countries and cities we speak to, and is the role of young people in all this work. You mentioned how can we get through, and we've realized through a different set of exchanges systematically the question of how do we include youth and the innovative solutions that can be brought up in those conversations is critically important. So the UN is enhancing its work in that area. Multiple agencies are putting a lot of emphasis on this area of work, and UNDRI, in the context of Sendai framework implementation, will also be enhancing its work on the inclusiveness agenda that accompanies most and any of these discussions. And I think that more normative last statement probably just says that the whole system has to be equipped, and the members of that system and the actors of that system have to be equipped to accompany and absorb these conversations to be able to apply them on their day-to-day work. So I think that it would be fantastic to see how these different networks down the line, or at some point in the work or the implementation of such activities at some point, include younger people who may bring new and innovative solutions, and who reiterated in our discussions in the region a number of times the fact that they are not parts of vulnerable groups that need to be addressed as potential victims of hazards, but are actually actors of change in the process. And I think that that is an element we should keep in mind going forward. So with that, I'll leave Yaro the pleasure of the final word. Over to you, Yaro.
There's almost nothing to add. I mean, you have been so exhaustive, both Pina and Andrew. I would just highlight this network concept. I mean, I have been having two hats during this session. I mean, before the scientist and coordinator of the project, on the other hand, also a member of a global network, advocacy, but also knowledge network. And I really believe that creating alliances for specific purposes, for specific improvements, for specific goals is the way ahead. And that takes us out of our comfort zone, scientists, policymakers, Andrew has presented is also a network, MCR 2030, although UNDRR is sponsoring a number of networks, but this is exactly the creating networks, but also bridging the networks and creating opportunities to mutual learning and something to do together. This is absolutely that would be my concluding words on top of what Pina and Andrew said. I definitely see this is the way to go forward and achieve the impact.
Yes, indeed. So I don't have many words to add on top of what you three already said, but I can just quickly wrap up the main things that you were mentioning. What is important to address is support the financial, especially in the local level, to make it also like in a good scala as well. We need the peer-to-peer learning for bringing and the awareness and also building also this knowledge in these communities, for example, that they are not very much aware of it. Definitely bringing communities and civil society is one key action, and the youth, as you Andrew were saying as well, it is very important. And I think in some cases that is also that is the opportunity that we want to do, to develop different type of activities in future events or activities, projects that we want to develop. This is the floor is open, the floor is ours, and there's just ideas that needs to be been written and actions and to be done. So no further words to be said. Thank you very much for all your active participation. Thank you very much for being so active. Thank you, Pina, Andrew, and Yaro for your time. And we will have another possible discussion soon.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Off to you, Danny.
Thank you.
Thank you to everyone. I mean, I'm going to wrap up today and talk a little bit about what's going to happen tomorrow. That was a very interesting panel. I mean, I don't want to repeat what we just said here, but just like really to say that it's really, really interesting to hear from these very important networks that have so many members about how we can collaborate, you know, and boost impact. And of course, not only boost impact, but raise awareness. I think it's both, right, that we're trying to do with the collaborative work. So thanks, Laura, as well for the moderation. And I want to thank actually all the speakers for the whole day of today. And also for the active participation of the listeners here. We had a very lively chat today. The Q&A it was really full, and thanks, Jaro, for being so prolific and providing a lot of answers, and also for the other speakers. I'm sure that if you skim through the Q&A, you're going to see a lot of different points raised there, and a lot of resources also that are mentioned. So please make sure to check the Q&A. I also would like to make a little bit of a recap of the day. So we had the privilege of hearing from esteemed speakers, and they share their insights with us on this very important topic of insurance and innovative financing and nature-based solutions, and all the links to the eco-DRR adaptation fields. Jaro from CMCC took us on a journey, shedding light on the processes from proposal writing to coordinating this project. We had also heard from Alice saying valuable insights on the unique aspects of coordination and support actions, and what the role that these projects have in the European landscape. We were honored to have Peter Löffler from the Directorate General for Climate Action, DG Klima, join us, and he has enlightened us on the pivotal role of nature-based solutions in achieving climate goals, outlining the importance within the European Green Deal and the policies related to it. We also had our keynote speaker, Svenja Serminski, sharing valuable trends and developments in the intersection of nature and insurance, which is NATURANCE. It's the name of our project, offering really thought-provoking perspectives. I also saw in the chat people saying that we should be more attentive about the EU taxonomy and see that the whole insurance sector and adaptation and nature-based solutions are taken seriously within the taxonomy. Throughout the day, we explored NATURANCE project's objectives and significance. We heard also from DG RTD with Fleur on how NATURANCE fits into the landscape of NBIS EU-funded projects. We shared in the link, this very, very fresh report from the EIB, the European Investment Bank, on the latest findings related to the difficulties and the challenges related to financing nature-based solutions. Please make sure to check that resource. It's the most comprehensive resource on the topic since 2015. We also had opportunity to engage in a stimulating panel that you just heard on joining forces, where experts discussed the integration of insurance and finance solutions for nature-based solutions and disaster risk reduction. And yeah, so we're closing the webinar today. I would just really like to express my gratitude. In the screen, you can see the day of tomorrow. So tomorrow we're going to hear about the 2 other innovation labs. You heard only a sneak peek about the first one today, and then we're going to dive really into a working session with you, and we're going to have the contact points of the innovation labs moderating the session. So yeah, please come and join us tomorrow. And with this, I really want to thank you for your participation. Yeah, we also have in the chat a lot of links shared. So just for you to be sure that you're not going to lose anything, because we always get asked. We're going to share the presentations. We're going to share also the important links. So keep hooked to our NATURANCE website. And with this, I close this webinar today. Thank you.